Thanks for bearing with me on the technology. I don't normally simulcast, so we're on two different locations today. And thank you for joining. And again, I wanted to talk to you today about my calling. I've been having conversation on my Facebook page since January 6th about the elements of calling, what calling's about, why calling is significant, how do we actually walk in calling. Hopefully, some of that's been valuable to you. And I don't normally put that on this page, and I'm going to explain to you why on my Facebook profile. I'm normally reserving that for the page, but today I'm kind of shifting gears, and I want to talk about why I'm even doing this, like what I'm seeing my calling to be. And so, just to get into that for a second, let me just share with you where you can see this normally, because after today, we'll go back to just talking about this in other places. So I'm currently already putting this on my Facebook page, which is Todd Boyum. So facebook.com/Todd Boyum. And that's where you can see me come live every day at noon and share some really cool things with you that are hopefully helpful and, participate with me. I would love to have you participate. I would love you to come and share with me, what's working for you there. Now, I'm actually now not putting it live, but I am taking after the live and putting those on YouTube in a playlist called Calling. So you can go to youtube.com/Todd Boyum and go to the playlist and watch everything. So if you wanted to catch up and see what we've been talking about, that's a good way to do it because it's a little easier than scrolling down on the Facebook page. And I'm going to be putting it on my blog, not so much from a video. I probably will put the videos there too, but I'll definitely be starting to share a brief written form of what I'm going to talk about, or a couple of sentences about that on the blog in the next week or so here. So you could also subscribe there if you want. So that's just a couple of places where you could see this normally. But what I wanted to get to today was more about my calling. So again, we've been talking about the concept of calling, but what is Todd up to? So many of you, I have like 1,300 friends on Facebook, and they're diverse, right? I mean, I worked at Dell for 31 years. Many of those friends come from Dell, and Dell's a very diverse place. I have friends from countries all over the world. They have different backgrounds, different faiths, different cultures, and so I'm aware of that. Now, even in my other friends, I have friends from church, I have friends from scouting, I have friends from when I grew up, other organizations I've been part of, and even some friends who, traditionally I've kind of tried to keep my Facebook page to be friends, but I do have some people that are sort of friends of friends that I've met in the coaching community who have connected with me that I haven't really met yet. So there's just a wide variety of lifestyles and other things. So when I share my calling, I hope that everybody will just bear with me that I'm not trying to manipulate anybody or judge anybody or put anybody else's that has a different kind of perspective. In fact, I actually really love everybody's perspective. I love everybody's the diversity that I have in my friends, even those who see the world very, very differently than me. And I think if you were to talk to various people that are close to me that do have a different world than me, they would say that. Now, maybe the reason that some people think that is because maybe in the past I haven't been as open. Maybe I've been more judgmental. And if that's been me and I've done that to you, I would just ask you to forgive me. But anyway, as I talk about this today, I don't want any of you guys to this is just me and what I feel like God's calling me to. And so just take it from that standpoint, right? Like this is just get to know what Todd's trying to do and why he's trying to do it. That's kind of the goal. So, what I'm mostly doing right now is being an executive coach and a speaker, and really doing that in the space of high performance, but also in the space of faith. Because for me, those two things came together as a young person, right about the time when I was a hot mess as a teenager. I was, involving myself in lots of personal development, conversations that really helped me kind of find my way as a young adult. But I also really met Christ in that space. My faith really became a real thing to me at that place. And so for me, those two things have always intersected with each other. When I see a principle, I can almost always connect to where scripturally that principle is in the Bible too. And I find that all true principles of goodness and success and how to find significance in the world um, tend to line up with God. And if I hear a principle and it doesn't really line up with God, it's usually one that's not really a very solid principle. It's not one that's stood the test of time, principle wise. So I think the long-term principles of personal development line up with God's way of seeing the world very well. And so I really want to help people in those spaces. And I don't really care, like, if I'm working with somebody and they're not a Christian, we don't sit here and talk about a whole bunch of Christian things. But when I am talking to a Christian group, obviously we're more free to use that vernacular. It's no different than if you were, meeting somebody that was really into sports. You might talk more about sports, and if you're meeting somebody that's into movies, you might talk about movies. I as a person have multiple dynamics just like anybody else, and I can pick and choose which ones serve the audience that I'm working with. So I work with a lot of people purely on a personal development kind of construct, but some people that are more in faith will have a little bit more of a conversation where that intersects these things as well. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So, but what I'm really called to, what I'm really hoping to develop over time, is really to help how high performance and even higher faith really come together to create the highest calling for people. Like how can we know we're really pursuing our calling, and what does it take to do that, right? So now, before I launched this, I spent 31 years at Dell as a strategist, mentor, leader. I did a lot of coaching there. I was a marketing executive, so lots of business and in product development experience. I was able to develop products that are used by 50 million people around the world. So I have a lot of background, and those things started all the way from pioneering, like they were literally startups within Dell, to being growth things, to being things that have massive scale, like 50 million people, and then even taking things that have massive scale and destroying them and starting over again. So rebuilding a civilization that has become stale. I've had those different experiences. And so when I'm coaching with somebody from a business standpoint, um, obviously my coaching frame has a whole high performance model to it, but I'm also able to leverage, many, many skills that I've picked up in the 31 years I worked at Dell. But I also did a lot of work in a variety of different kinds of ministries, in a variety of different kinds of churches, and in scouting and other kinds of organizations, schools. So just a lot of background that I'm trying to bring to help people move forward with their dream, with what they are trying to bring, the goodness they're trying to bring to the world. And so it's, predominantly I try to stay in a coaching frame, but there's a little bit of consulting that I'll bring to people too, especially if that's what they want. So that's just a little bit about, what I've been doing. Now, what I want to kind of talk about what I believe, and this really gets to why this calling is important to me. I believe that, God really made us in his image to be co-creators with him. And I believe that we can't not do that, whether we believe in him or not, right? Like if you are a person and you don't believe in God at all, right? You're an atheist. You're still creating a culture. You're creating a culture with your family. You're creating a culture with the people you work with. We have creation built into us as human beings. And so whether you believe that God existed and gave us that, or whether you just believe it's just coincidental, it doesn't really matter. We are all going to create culture. It's something we have in common. In fact, in the old days, people would call it common grace. And what I really believe is that, the vast majority of what a believer and a non-believer has, if we wanted to compare the two, which is really kind of what I'm hoping to get beyond. But, if we were going to compare the two, right, is that we have so much more in common grace than we do in what what theologians call, special grace or specific grace, right? And that's when you start talking about salvation and other things. We'll talk about that some other time. But um, God created us in His image, and He created us to be co-creators, and we are always all creating, even if our job is just kind of, pretty prescribed, and we're just having work to do. It's just operational. Nonetheless, the way in which we do it, the way in which we interact with people creates a culture around us. We can't help but do it. So, consequently, if you want to help people, you have a ground to help people on the basis of improving their ability to create a powerful and awesome culture, regardless of whether or not you're going to talk about the aspects of theology and religion that you might talk about if you were getting into a Christian metaphor, right? So I feel like we're in good company. Like, of the 1,300 friends I have, I know they're in all kinds of different lifestyles, and there's a variety of different people that come to my mind that are very, very different than me. But I could still sit down with any of them and hear what they were trying to accomplish and ask them powerful coaching questions that would enable them to gain more momentum and to, unlock things that were having them stuck or that were holding them back or that they just hadn't really been giving attention to, that were right there in front of them, that suddenly catapulted what they were trying to accomplish into the world. And it doesn't matter, it would work for any of them because we all have this thing we're all trying to do. We're all trying to create a better life. And so I just believe that that's something that we can all have in common. And I believe that God created everyone with a purpose, right? I believe that I'm called to value people and therefore their purpose in the world and to care for them, and if I can, to help them. And now, I'm not trying to force that help on anybody. If they want it, fine. If they don't, okay. But I care about those 1,300 friends that I have. I think that what they're doing in the world, you know, um, uh, they're doing what they feel like they're called to do, even if they don't say it that way, right? Even if it's just career or whatever. But, I know that I look at my friends and like in that group, there's obviously a lot of Christians that came from my church community. There's a lot of people that aren't. And I see the same kinds of struggles with each of them, right? So I see people who, I see divorce um, really ravaging families. And it's just as much in the Christian community as in the non-Christian community. I see people who are struggling with their career and where they want to go and being able to provide for their family. I see people struggling with the grief of life, when someone passes away or, goes through, something that just experiences a tremendous amount of loss. Um, and I also see people working hard to get by and overcome that and move life forward. And I think that, one of the things I love to do is help any of those people in any of those frames. But there is a little bit of a more specific thing I'm trying to do, and that's why I want to tell you. But I want it to kind of set the groundwork that um, I see that we're really all trying to make life work, and it doesn't really matter to me um, where someone is. I don't want to come and judge them. I want to come and just love on them and create an environment of love and grace. That's what I feel called to do. In fact, I feel like that's what God does. God offers love and grace to everybody. So I'm called to do the same thing, regardless of where they are on their journey, whether they're far from God, whether they're seeking, whether they already know Him, whether they're running hard for Him. None of that matters, right? Wherever someone is, I want to meet them there with an environment of love and grace and see what I can do to help them take some next step from where they are, not from where I am, but from where they are. So hopefully that makes sense. And I believe that um, God, here's the thing where it probably is going to sound a little different. I believe that God is about all that we are and all that we do. That He's about our work and our daily life as much as He is about any kind of faith life we have. So to me, it's not about religion at all. And I don't think God cares about religion. I know when we think of church, we think of a building or an organization like the Baptist or the Catholics or whatever. But I really think that when God thinks about His church, He thinks about the people He loves that are His children, independent of those organizations. Those organizations have a purpose and they're there too. I'm not speaking against them, but I'm saying that the church is something different than that. And so for those of us who are following him, we've come to live in this world where, and I think that this is really part of the problem, where our faith is what we do when we go to church. Maybe on Wednesdays we go, or maybe we have a Bible study or life group midweek. And when we do those things, we're thinking about God. And then when we go to work or in our day-to-day life, we're not really thinking about God. Now, maybe every now and then we have a really difficult moment and we cry out to him. But why don't we cry out to him to be with us every single minute in what we're doing every single day? Why don't we invite him into the full living? There's this, thing where people have said in the past, God helps those who help themselves. And, God definitely does invite us to participate. We are called to co-create with him, but it's to actually intentionally co-create with him, not to do it on our own unless we need him. He's not interested. I mean, he's willing, but his real interest is, I want to take that journey with you every single day in your work and life. And because if you don't do that, here's what happens. You're like an actor. One minute you're at work and you're all about work and you're not thinking about God at all, and then the next minute you're trying to put on that you're all about your life with God. And the reality is he's present with us all the time. Now, obviously, that's me as a Christian saying that, and again, you may not believe in it, but I believe he's present with us whether you believe it or not, and that he's trying to reach out to you and love you all the time. Now, again, I'm not trying to force that on anybody, but to the extent that people want that, and especially with my brothers and sisters who are Christian, I am trying to say to them, like, hey, he is trying to be with you in your work. He wants you to have an integrated life. He wants to abide with you and remain with you all the time. How do you do that? Right? What does that look like? Because we don't practice that. And so I'm trying to explore why we don't practice that and how do we practice that. And that's really kind of what a lot of what I'm trying to talk about in the calling space is. Because if we were called, rather than just having a career, see, a career can be very separate. I'm doing my career, but if I'm called, it's because he called me, and so now we are doing something together, he and I. It's a fundamental difference when you're looking at it from a calling perspective than just a career perspective. So I believe that we can and should invite God into 100% of our lives, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And this is another thing I think that we've been trained by our churches, that God wants us to be perfect, and if we're messed up, we shouldn't come to him. That's the exact opposite. Our whole faith is based on the fact that we're always going to be incomplete without him, and so we should be running to him, and we should be able to dialogue with him, and he wants us to dialogue with him about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and let that continue to grow us and evolve us and bring us closer to him. So I believe that calling is first off about that. And so I just got a text from somebody, but I think it's a completely message. It's not on the lives here. So anyhow, so that's what I think. I think that, we can and we should be inviting. And I think calling is a way to do that because we're acknowledging that calling and that everything we're doing is part of what he wants to be a part of. Now, again, I kind of talked about this earlier. I think that all true principles align with God, even if we don't acknowledge that, right? But I think when we do acknowledge that, they go so much further. So for instance, let me tell you, in the high performance coaching frame that I use, there's 6 habits that have been scientifically proven to move the needle, right? And they are clarity. You have to know what you're trying to do. You have to have the energy to be able to do it. You have to have the courage to push into it. You have to raise your own necessity. You can't wait for somebody else to give you permission. You have to know how to be influential in it, and you have to know how to be productive in it. And so those habits and the skills that support those habits are what most move the needle in making somebody be a high performer. But faith is behind each of those things. Where does clarity come from? Where do you get the idea from? Where do you get the clarity? Where does energy come from, right? I mean, we produce energy in our bodies, but like we can't make a hand, right? Where does that energy in our bodies come from? And we know that, we're we only have so much control of being able to put that together. Even sometimes, even when we're doing everything we should be doing, we're still not having the energy we need. So I believe that God's behind all those things, right? I could go through each of them and you could see that, like, where does courage come from? It actually comes from the word heart. So where does heart come from, right? And where does passion come from, right? And so I believe that faith is sort of underlying those things that are just naturally the skills that give us high performance in the first place. But I believe also that when we pursue it with God, we invite him to bring things into it that are beyond ourselves as well. Not only because can he change us so that we can bring the best of ourselves to our endeavor, but he can do things beyond us that we don't get when we're just operating out of our own strength. So as a Christian, your best case world should be to bring those two things together. Now, an interesting thing is I think that sometimes Christians aren't known for being able to really bring high performance as much. And again, that's kind of odd because if we have all the same things that everybody else did, but we can also bring our relationship with God to the equation, why shouldn't we have more clarity to that? And I think it's largely because we don't actually bring those things together because we are trying to live them as separate things. I'm trying to, in my own world, cease to do that, and I'm trying to help other people explore how they could go further if they were bringing God into the equation as well. So that's kind of part of what I want to do. Now here's the other thing. I think if you talk about success, and Earl Nightingale had this conversation once where he said something, and then someone wrote him a letter and said, "Well, then how do you account for people who, put people into the sex slave trade and stuff like this?" And he had to kind of break down and say, "You're right. I don't mean that. I mean something that's a worthy goal." But and so when we think about the word success, you could say, well, success comes from God, but it can be used for things towards death or towards life, right? There are people who are successful and make lots of money and are successful, but they're really bringing death to the world. They're really bringing things that are not really bringing more life to the world. And I'm very interested in working with people who really want to bring more life to the world, more life in their own life and more life to the people that they're trying to serve. And so I'm trying to do that with a leader frame. Now, there's a lot of people that are trying to do this kind of stuff, right? And there's a specific space that I'm trying to work in. And so this really gets down to it. I'm really trying to work with leaders. While I can work with anybody in my coaching frame, the people I'm most trying to work with are leaders who are pursuing calling, not just career, right? So if you're trying to drive your career and you want to really know how that is calling and bring God into that, and that doesn't mean like, I know, like I can say that and people think, oh, you mean bring your Bible to work. That's not what I mean at all, right? I mean, God, like what our work is, should be worship. And so how do you pursue it in that way? And so people that already have a heart for that, I'm not trying to convince people to go have a heart for that. I'm trying to meet the people who already have a heart for that and want to pursue calling, and they're not finding enough people talking to them about how that can happen. So if that's you or somebody like that, that's you're kind of in my place. I'm also looking for leaders who see God's presence is true in every aspect of their life, but they're trying to figure out how to integrate that since there's so few things that really support us in our world. Our world kind of, when we go to church, they're talking about the gospel and church things, and when we go to work, they certainly aren't talking about God. And so where does somebody say how those two things work together? And that's really what I'm trying to explore. And so if you're a leader who's trying to explore that too, and you feel like nobody's talking about that, I would love to talk to you. And then if you're a leader who has a heart and a longing to serve people and establish environments of love and grace in your workplace and in other non-church places. Now, I'm not against church places at all. I just think there's already plenty of people working on that. I think there's very few people working in the space of, workplace. And there are some workplace ministries, et cetera. But I'm not actually even really trying to talk about a workplace ministry. I'm trying to talk about an integration ministry, if you would, right? People that realize it's both and not either or, right? And so sometimes even, trying to get focused on the workplace is really just trying to take the gospel and put it into a workplace context. I'm trying to say, how is God infused in everything you're doing in your life? And so it's a little bit different, And again, I think that those are great ministries, not against them, but that's what it's doing. Now, I'm not trying to do this from a nonprofit standpoint. So I've been using the word ministry, but and I think that our work can be ministry, but I'm not necessarily trying to pursue this as a ministry because I want to help people understand it's not about whether it's nonprofit or profit, right? You can actually pursue this right in the middle of your profit work. And so I'm trying to model that. And so I'm not, asking for you guys to give me money at all, period. I want to serve people, and I have rates and charges, and I am going to be building more of that and products that people can buy. And that's going to be my approach to funding the work that I'm doing. But what I want to do is help people, whether they're a profit business or a nonprofit. Um, and so that's another group. I'm looking for leaders if they're profit, they're nonprofit, don't really care. But I'm especially interested in people that are in a profit business because how do you represent God in a world that's not really about trying to share the gospel with people, but how do you go bring that to the table? So, and then the last thing is I'm very interested in working with churches that see that there's a new thing God's doing, and I really think there is a new thing that God's doing. Our church in the U.S. is declining, and it's declining because it's been kind of this thing of you go to a church and there's a guy talking, and there's hundreds or 50 or thousands or whatever it is, people listening and participating, and I'm really trying to meet those thousands of people and say, hey, you have a calling too. How are you walking in your calling? And help them walk in their calling. Um, and so I'm not so much trying to help churches do church well. They already do church well. But there are churches that are beginning to see that they need to really help the saints live out their faith in the real world. And so I'm very interested in working with leaders of churches that see that God is equipping the saints in this day, and that's what's really happening, and to bring their faith to their day-to-day life, and that's where I would love to go and lead groups or create curriculum for them. I'm actually working with some churches now on a program like that, and so that's some of the leaders that I would like to see. Now, how can you help me? Well, let me share with you a couple ways you could help. First off, you could pray for me. And I'd really appreciate it if you would let me know if you would be on your prayer team. Many years ago, in studying this kind of incubation model, I ran across somebody who talked about creating prayer raising, and I think that that's a fantastic idea. So I'm not looking for fundraising, but I would love to have prayer raising. So if you're willing to pray for me in this respect, I would love for you to do that, and I'd love to hear that you're doing that so that I know and can appreciate you. And you can just message me in Facebook or whatever. I'd really appreciate that. So then you can also like the page. So again, I'm not normally talking about this on my personal feed because I think everybody was getting tired of me talking about it there. Because look, I have a very diverse audience again, and not everybody is going to be interested in this topic. So if you are interested in this topic, you will have to go over to my page and connect with me there, or again, go watch it on YouTube or wherever. So there's a couple different places for you. And then I love it if you can provide feedback. So I'm not just interested in talking or getting a like. I mean, it's great. Thank you if you've liked something I've said. That's wonderful. But what I really want is feedback. I'm very used to working, I spent 31 years at Dell working with teams of people, and I would get feedback from, we say, oh, let's try this. And they'd be like, I don't know, let's try this. And so feedback is an amazing thing. And that doesn't mean just, mutual admiration society. Tell me if something I'm talking about is helping. Tell me if it's not helping. Tell me what would help that you think I'm not talking about. Tell me if something came across the wrong way so I know, so I can improve it, because I'm very interested in serving and serving well. And I need that kind of feedback to know if this is connecting or not. Look, if you like what I'm talking about, if it's serving you in some way, share it with your friends who also might value it. I would love that. Love to get more people coming. feel like I'm somewhat talking into the emptiness void at the moment, and that's okay. I'm kind of trying to get into the rhythm, but obviously, I want to be able to connect with people. So if you are served by something and you would feel like that would benefit somebody else, then please share it with them, and also connect me. Like maybe there's somebody who would specifically benefit from not just hearing about this, but meeting one on one. I'm doing a couple of free coaching sessions a month, about 8. I mean, it'll be different in different months, but like in January, I did 8 free coaching sessions with people. So, and those are really no strings attached. So if you have somebody that could, just benefit from seeing whether or not this could be helpful to them, um, that's a way to connect me with somebody. But also, not just with people, but with organizations, right? If you know of a church or something that would love to have me come and do a talk on calling, and where that what calling should mean for all of us, I would love to do that. So feel free if you have some ideas to reach out to me and let's brainstorm them. I would love to hear from you on that. And then collaborate with me. Longer term. Right now, I'm trying to just kind of get this going and coach with people and things like that. That's most of what I'm doing. But longer term, I really want to develop this into an incubation model that might have other services by other people that could serve the participants of the incubation model. Right now, when I think about the people I'm working with, I'm mostly working with people who already have a business and they're at some pivot point where they're trying to go up to the next level or make some kind of slight shift in what they're doing. But I've also worked with some people that are way at the beginning and they would just like to figure out how to get going. And I love that. I love that moment, that pioneering moment too. So, and again, of course, I'm working with some larger organizations, really large organizations that are trying to develop something new as well. So there's a variety of different ways you can work, but longer term in this collaboration, I'm hoping to, maybe somebody that's starting off needs some other services for their business. I'd like to be able to have other people that I could refer to them in essence. And so that's one way that I might collaborate with people, but maybe there's others. Maybe you're speaking and you'd like somebody to come and speak on calling too. I'd love to partner with you on that. So reach out to me if that's a way that we can work. And then finally, the talks we've been doing on calling are a way to sort of ad lib a more structured course that I have coming. And that's a course that I'm developing in partnership with another organization. But what I'm going to do is beta that with some people. And so if you're interested in becoming a beta team member for the calling course, I would love for you to connect with me on that. So just instant message me on that. And I don't have the links for that just set up just yet, but they're coming. But just message me right now. Let me know that you're interested. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that course in kind of a webinar format, probably in a few weeks. Still hammering out the date on that just yet. But if you're interested, now's the time to let me know about it. Going to probably cap that at 10 to 20 people somewhere. So let me know if you want to be a part of that. Anyway, hopefully all of that was a little bit helpful in sharing with you a little bit about what I feel like God's calling me to do. And what that is to help people who are trying to create organizations that serve others be more successful, for them to be able to pursue that calling with more momentum and with more success and more with God and not just out of their own force. And that could be that you're already perceiving it as something that you're bringing to God, or maybe it's something that you just have a heart for God, but you've been living your work completely differently. But you've kind of asked yourself, why is that? And I would love to help you. Or again, maybe you're just like, hey, I'm just really trying to make my business succeed more. Great, I can work with you on that frame too. Because again, there's everything that God has put that's beautiful in the world and that are the principles of success work for you, all the time. So anyway, that's a little bit more about what I'm doing. And I really thank you guys for listening. I know this is a little bit long today, And so thank y'all all for being my friends too. And forgive me if I am talking about business stuff on my personal page. I promise I won't do this all the time. That's why if you really want to hear more about calling and high performance and how that can help you succeed, you want to get some of those kinds of tips, I need you to hop over to my page and like the page and find the content there, because that's where it's going to be most days. But anyway, again, hope y'all had a wonderful Thursday, and take care. Thanks again for joining. Bye.